Well, it was fun while it lasted, but I'm sad to say that excellence has lost all pretense of a good story. Excellence was always going to be a story about racism and white supremacy, but Brandon Thomas and Carrie Randolph did a good job of couching that in a pretty obvious metaphor that was just off the nose enough not to derail the story. The original story revolved around Spencer Dales not living up to his father's expectations, and then finding out that his grandmother had been hurt in some way by the powers that be, and that his father wouldn't do anything about it. The world building made it very clear that this was a world in which black people could use magic, but only use it to protect white people, and implied that this power could be taken away at any time. Spencer fights the system as a metaphor for the conflict with his father, who was at the top of that system, and that worked very well. Spencer fails in his mission to cure his grandmother and gets taken down by the boy his father favored over him, Aaron, and loses his magic in the process. His father makes a deal with Spencer to get his powers back, and then sends Spencer to capture Aaron, who's broken the rules by shagging his charge instead of protecting her. In that fight, Spencer and Aaron's minds get connected and they share memories, which helps them understand each other. It's also hinted at that Spencer's father is more involved with what happened with his grandmother than Spencer originally knew or suspected. The natural place for the story to go would have been for Spencer to find out more about the Aegis, who or what grants people access to magic, and how his father was involved. After all, Spencer still hates or is at least angry with his father, and the specter of what happened to his grandmother hangs over both of them. That would have been Spencer's driving focus. What did you do to make them hurt Gigi? But that's not what happens. Oh, Spencer does learn more about the Aegis. He learns how it's evil and prejudiced and holding his people back. He learns about agitators and how anyone who fights the system has their lives ruined. He learns how women are oppressed by the system. All these political elements were in the story, but they were never the sole focus, never this explicit. It was left to the reader to interpret the metaphors for themselves. The only clear track was a conflict between Spencer and his father Raymond, but after issue 8, that was completely dropped. Instead, the story became about how white people be evil, and it's gotten worse ever since. That's where we end up with issue 10, with Spencer on the run after stealing a scroll that showed that his father was once an agitator. Spencer barely manages to get away, and uses a doppelganger to speak with his mother, who appears to be hiding something about what happened to Spencer's grandmother, or possibly hiding info about how Spencer got his magic powers. Spencer leaves a message for one of his friends helping him, and then hops on a train to Chi-Town to get out the city. Meanwhile, evil White Boy sends some goons to intimidate Spencer's father by threatening his mother, which goes horribly wrong for them. And then White Boy shows up to chat about the deal that he made with Raymond. He wants Raymond to get Spencer and his friends at any cost. Like I said before, the emotional thread that made the story interesting has been completely lost, traded in for this on-the-nose attack on the ghost of white supremacy, and the book suffers for it. Firstly, it's dragging along. It's not that we're not getting information, it's that the story is no longer building to anything. Instead, it's just showing how horrible the system is, how plenty of people seem to know it and go along with it because of the power it gives them, and how ultimately none of these people appear to be oppressed, given that they can basically do whatever they want as long as they protect their white charges. I'm sure that's not Thomas or Randolph's point, but that's how it comes across. There are too many people in power for it to be believable that they're being oppressed, especially not with this inept jackass. That's the second problem. Supposedly he's got total control, but he's getting punked by a teenager acting on a whim. This is supposed to be the big bad, but he's not scary, threatening, or even capable. When your main antagonist is a pushover, you fail. He's not a threat if he can't act without using his pawns to do everything for him. If this is supposed to be the evil white man in charge, this nigga should be Aizen Sosuke, not Dick Dastardly. When he shows up, he should be the most badass person there, someone no one, not even Raymond Dales, would dare challenge. Instead, Raymond threatens the dude, quote, "Do you remember what I promised you? If anything else happened to her? 'Cause it seems like maybe you forgot." Aizen would have dropped this dude to his knees just powering up and said some bogus shit like, "That was just cracking the seal. What would happen if I opened it?" No, instead we get this shit. A racist on his shoulder. Zippity-doo-dah. And look, I knew it would eventually go there. I said that in my first video about the series. It's just that they were doing so well, I hope that they would stay on the path of good storytelling and not let their politics get in the way, because politics can easily ruin a good story, and it's usually when the author can't or won't balance it. We've only seen one side of the story, not just Spencer's, but specifically only the side of the magicians. We have no idea what their charges think or if they even know what's going on. It's not even clear if the broader world is aware. Now, this wouldn't have been a problem if the story had stayed with Spencer and Raymond's conflict, but the moment that it turned into "we was Kangs," it created the problem everybody had with the comic book Black. How in the hell are these people being oppressed if they're so powerful? We're 10 issues in now, 3 issues after the whole all white people are evil reveal, and there's still no explanation for it. These people can literally do whatever they want. Different people have greater access to magic than others. Some of them, like Spencer, appear to have a little problem defying, bending, or even breaking the rules. So how are they oppressed? How is this happening? Why would Raymond be remotely afraid of White Boy when he can easily take down multiple magicians? A good storyteller would catch this and try to answer some of the questions so the story makes sense, but Brandon Thomas and Carrie Randolph let their politics take control so the story goes off the rails. And I'm not the only one who noticed. In the letters pages, several people brought up the same point. Now I'm going to give Thomas and Randolph credit for publishing critical comments. Of course, they think they've got the best clapbacks, so that's why they publish them. But all they really do is show that they're racist. One guy, a black dude in the 60s, comments about how the Black Lives Matter banner splattered all over issue 8 is a problem because BLM is a divisive movement. But Brandon says, quote, "I don't see how Black Lives Matter could credibly be accused of dividing and tearing down anything other than the reality that black and brown people can be murdered in the street or their homes or imaginary and perceived threats without accountability." You mean like all those black and brown people murdered in the streets when they looted, rioted, and torched dozens of cities? Or the ones who assaulted and killed white people because they were white? Or the ones who had politicians pay their bail after these idiots were arrested for vandalism and assault? Because if ever there was a time when black and brown people would be murdered for imaginary and perceived threats, it would be when they were going around actually assaulting and killing people. And that didn't happen. Of course, Brandon has no problem understanding divisiveness when the commenter brings up the bullshit about the all-white ancestry and Trump being a part of it. Then Brandon completely understands how supporting a movement that caused the mob to descend on a place to vandalize it, he's talking about the Capitol, could be perceived as divisive. That's because Brandon thinks Trump is racist, which leads him to say shit like this, quote, "His entire platform is white supremacy, specifically white male supremacy." You can't reason with that kind of stupid, and the same goes for Carrie's response. He says, quote, "White supremacy, not white people, please note the difference, has been a primary antagonist of this book from issue number 1. Yeah, there is no difference. This is the same game feminists love to play with the patriarchy and men. They say patriarchy, and they're clearly talking about men, but when they're called on it, they claim they're talking about the system. No one buys this bullshit. We all know that the patriarchy really means men, and white supremacy really means white people. We know this because when you talk long enough, that's where you always go. It's not in anyone's heads, it's coming from you. It always goes back to you talking about the people, not the system, which is why these two attack a white reader who points out the same flaws. The reader says that the original metaphor was pretty obvious, but replacing it with a gaggle of racist white people insulted readers and was confusing because race was never specifically mentioned in the story, which is true. He also makes this point, quote, "Do you really think many white people think the way these people do?" Yes, he does. But Brandon is smart enough to realize that actually saying that will cost him the few readers he has, so he says, quote, "Do I think many white people belong in the ancestry scene? I wouldn't say many, but I'd say more than enough." Remember what I just said? That it always goes back to the people. There you go. And by the way, Brandon, that's racist. There's no other word for it. That's racist. And we know this because if you said it about any other group of people, it would be considered racist. Imagine if Uncle Bad Touch said this about his Super Predator comment. Imagine if someone asked Biden if many black people think this way, and his response was, I wouldn't say many, but I would say more than enough. It's racist, and so is Brandon. He goes on a rant trying to defend his racism, arguing that other people think it too, so that makes it right because there's no way a consensus could possibly be wrong. And then he attacks the reader more by saying that the book wasn't meant to be neutral or safe, and there's a bunch of books with white characters, so the reader should set aside his feelings about being labeled evil because of his race and just read the book. No. You don't get to insult your readers because you believe race is bullshit. Let's be honest, ain't no black people reading this book. There's me, that 60-year-old dude, and 5 other niggas reading this book. Everybody else is white. And it's a really bad idea to write a story where the point of your story is that your readers are evil because of their race. That is not what happens with books with white characters. Not at all, not even close. If you think any comic books sold in stores today are written with that overt or covert purpose of claiming all non-white people are evil, you're fucking delusional and racist. Both Brandon and Carrie know this, which is why Carrie says to this man, "Why would our cartoonish bad guys make you feel personally insulted?" For the same reason you'd be insulted if every black character in a comic was a cartoonish villain, you dipshit. Isn't this your complaint? That black people are treated unfairly and turned into cartoonish villains? You know what you're doing. You clearly intended for white people to have this response. That's your point, both as you and Brandon admit. You want white folks to be upset. Why you acting like you wasn't doing that? I have astigmatism in both eyes. I can barely see 3 inches in front of my face. I can still see this shit. This is the game these people love to play. I wasn't talking about you, so why you offended? As you proceed to talk about the person's entire group, and then have the nerve to say you hope people will still read the book. Nah, they done, son. If the on-the-nose ancestry scene and the BLM shit wasn't a turnoff, your responses would definitely lose you readers. This is the problem with caring more about your message than how your message comes across. You're so concerned about making your point that you missed that you already made it, and now you've gone way farther than you needed to go, revealing yourselves to be racist. You want to confront something? Confront your own biases. Confront your own worldview. You want people to see things through your eyes? Try seeing it through theirs. I know you think you do, but you don't. You don't understand other people, and you don't care, and that's why your book is failing. It hasn't completely failed, but it's getting there. I would dial it back so I could save what was left of a good story. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.